example of a transaction being done with the mole. So these people behind the till with the yellow t-shirts are advertising that they accept the mole. And the first thing that's going to happen, obviously they say what sort of goods they want, and then they can send a request to the mobile phone.
What would the world's financial system look like if it were built from scratch today? Most likely it would be on a digital platform. Cash would not be king, and all transactions would literally be at our fingertips. And as we've seen with mobile wallets such as Mole in Ethiopia, digital's dramatically lower transaction costs offers humanity the best hope to provide near universal access to financial products and services. But the developing world's digital journey is far from complete. Today, 1.7 billion of the world's poorest remain trapped in an inefficient cash economy that offers them no hope to insure themselves against risk, invest in their own labour, and work towards a life free from poverty. So to better understand how to include those left behind, today we sit down with CR2's Patrick Simons, head of pre-sales and a long-time expert in shepherding banks through their digital transformations. For much of the past 20 years, Patrick has been on the road, representing CR2 at the highest level, spending more than 1,000 days in 83 countries across Africa, America, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. An iPhone app records his air miles, 3 million kilometres and counting, enough to circle the globe 74 times. It's probably fair to say Patrick, CR2's standard bearer for promoting fintech strategies directly to the world's top banks, understands more than most how digital financial inclusion is impacting the global economy.
Well, there's a major amount of changes, particularly with the likes of fintech organizations coming in as well. So we're in a very good position at the moment to assist with digital financial inclusion. But what is digital financial inclusion? If you look at what the World Bank would state, can be summarized really in a quite simple form, is that there's a lot of people out there who are currently unbanked. And what we mean by unbanked is they don't have access to basic financial services. And those basic financial services are the ones that we expect to have, the ability to save, the ability to have access to insurance, getting access to financial advice and so on. And these are cornerstones of financial inclusion that are just not available to a huge proportion of the population when you look at it from a global basis. So the most basic part of it is giving somebody access to a bank account. Now, in the day of the mobile phone, the era that we're living here now, the most efficient device to use for giving people access to accounts are electronic wallets. So electronic wallets are a great way, low-cost way of having a bank account. So that's one of the main pillars that you are given with DFI. But the next part would be giving people access to low-cost credit. And this could be something as simple as maybe somebody in a developed world or developing worlds would need access to, a small microloan. Maybe they get paid on a monthly basis, and halfway through the month, they need to get access to some funds, maybe to pay for some education. And again, giving this as part of the cornerstone of DFI. Then, of course, there's a huge proportion of the population that are in our regions that are overseas, the diaspora population. So giving them a mechanism that they can send funds back home to their family or to their friends is very important. And there's ways of doing that today, but it's very costly. So with DFI, it's all about trying to make it very cost effective so that the consumer at the end of the day is not being hit with the transaction fees and so on. Now, another part of it is all around giving access to savings accounts. So there's a lot of initiatives that are going on, particularly at a community level, where in our markets you'll see that small groups get together and they have these savings clubs. And during the year, everyone will submit somebody on a weekly or on a monthly basis into the club. And then each month somebody will be given the full pool of funds that are in the account. And these are great things that can be digitized and made more efficient as well. But another area that's very important is being able to give consumers access to financial advice. And this is financial advice that would be done electronically. Let's say a consumer wants to get more credit than their profile really allows. Well, using an electronic form of financial advice can be a great way to allow the customer to better manage their income and expenditure. And then finally, the last pillar there is around insurance. Let's say there's a farmer and they need to get access to some credit to buy some seeds for growing their crop, and maybe get a little bit of insurance that just in case the yield in the crop isn't as good as the previous years, that they be covered for that. But what is the driving factors behind DFI? Well, there's two areas that you can look at. One is from a global perspective. The World Bank has got a great initiative that they want to try and get the developing countries more in line with getting as many people on board as possible. And there's a lot of benefits for that. And one of the main benefits lies around the fact that the more digitally included the society is, the more prosperous the actual economy is. And the more prosperous the economy is has a loop back where the consumers get more prosperous as well. So they're kind of proven statistics around that whole incentive. And this has been going on for a number of years. So the Maya Declaration was, I believe that's around 20 years ago when they first started coming up with these commitments. And there's a number of them since then. But typically the World Bank is incentivizing the central banks in each of these regions, who are then writing mandates for their member banks to go after DFI and make it a reality. So there's a lot of movement from that regard. And then we have the non-government organizations. So the likes of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is kind of taking a humanist approach to DFI. They are looking at incentivizing some of the banks, some of the member banks in these countries to run innovative schemes that are really getting down to the grassroots and helping out the consumers. Now, if you look at some of the concentration of DFI across the globe, some of the hotspots, and they're in the areas or the regions that CR2 are prominently promoting our products and services. So the likes of Nigeria is one of the countries that have got a lot of incentives, particularly by the central bank is really pushing DFI there. Ethiopia is another one. So the main thing here is that DFI is very much in our markets. But DFI is also making a lot of progress in areas that are outside of markets. So for the likes of Latin America, there's a number of projects that have been developed over the years to improve that. And even in India, for example, they've made great strides in getting people banked. The statistics that back that up are quite promising. But if we take a closer look at DFI and what are the main drivers in here, globally there are 1.7 billion adults who are currently unbanked. And that's come down significantly over the last number of years. So it was at approximately 2.5 billion about 5 years ago, and it's gradually dropping down. But the interesting statistic is that of the 1.7 billion people that are underbanked, there are 1.1 billion of them having mobile phones. And that is the centric device for digital financial inclusion. So it's a great starting point that we are at today. And then if you look at the financially excluded countries, well, the good thing for CR2 is that they're concentrated in the markets that we're in. And we've pioneered a lot of technology over the last 25 years, converging the digital channels with the physical channels. But it's not just about consumers, people who are saving or accessing the credit individually, but also as well small businesses. So I'm talking about small little businesses that might be a sole trader who buys some goods in the morning and then sells them throughout the day. And those people do have a float that they should be utilizing a lot better. But because of the under reach that they're getting, in a lot of cases, they don't become included in the financial system. For them to get money into the banking system, it might need them to shut down their business for a couple of hours so that they can get out to the institution to make the deposit.
So let's look at how DFI can impact the day in the life of so many different individuals across generations and demographics. Well, giving them access to cash conveniently is very important. So the agent network helps out tremendously with that. But also as well, to be allowing people to buy goods and services from merchants is a very important part of DFI. Remittances is very important as well. So allowing customers to be able to send money for invoices or for paying utility bills, etc. But also it could allow communities to share money amongst themselves, or families to be able to give loans out to members of the family. Maybe it's the grandparent giving the daughter a loan of some money so that she can then go on and pay for school fees for their daughter. Another example is giving access to credit facilities. So this could be a farmer who needs to get access to some funds to buy some seeds, to grow some crops, and then maybe to protect their yields through getting some insurance. All of this plays out in a very effective way when they're digitally financially included. So if you look at the demographics, 56% of the underbanked are actually women. And this amounts to around 200 plus million or more than actual men. And the thing is, in the markets that we're operating in, the woman is central to the family and central to managing finance. And it can be even the person who's bringing in the funds as well into the family. They might be working during the morning, as we saw in the previous video. But to help that person, first off, be able to become into the financial system. DFI is really going to be a cornerstone for that. But that will lead on to better wealth, better education, better well-being for their family, and most importantly, empowerment. So it's a key area that's important that DFI is addressing as well. But how do banks actually roll out DFI? Well, it's all about digitization. But, any bank, even if they have all the electronic channels, they still need to support their customers through a branch network. And over the years, what banks have actually done is to reach out further into regions that are underserved. They've formed agency networks. And this could be a supermarket chain or a petrol station chain where the banks have affiliated with. And through there, they're able to sell and expand their market. So expanding the market, acquiring new customers, also reducing the cost of serving those customers, and most importantly, being able to sell more products and services to those customers through agents. So an agent is a very important precursor that a bank has to have in place effectively for achieving DFI. So if we look at the platform that is behind DFI, well, one of the most important aspects is to be able to address the current challenges that are in these marketplaces. So in the developed worlds, data is just taken for granted. But in a lot of the markets that we're operating in, even if the data is available, the cost of data is really, really high. So we need to be very sensitive towards that. And again, with our platform, supporting the likes of USSD, which is a technology for feature phones, is very, very important for DFI. So we're not going to exclude anyone from the system based on the level of coverage that they have with data or the cost of that data as well. But also a very important aspect is around keeping the cost of DFI very, very low. It's all about being able to provide the convenient service, but at the same time, not to be charging too much to the consumer. So it's all about keeping the transaction costs down low, keeping the operational costs down low as well, so that the banks can pass that on to the consumers as well. Reach is very, very important, but the agency network and the telecommunications reach will address that part. But there are still areas that need to be addressed. And a lot of times as well, the regulations, although the central banks are mandated to push their members banks to do DFI, they often put in a number of obstacles in the bank's way. So again, to be able to come up with innovative ways of getting around those obstacles is an important challenge for the banks. And this is where CR2 can help out a lot as well. So looking at some of the innovations, well, even in our own customer base, like if you look at West Africa, the likes of Orabank launched an agency banking network in 2019 across 11 francophonic countries in West Africa. So this is a great testament to how our platform can be actually used very well to service the agents. And then if we look at Ethiopia, well, this is one of the countries that were selected as one of the top 25 priorities by non-government organizations and the World Bank as well. And they had an incentive that they wanted to put in place, that they had a huge percentage of the population included in the financial system by 2020. And they've made some very, very good strides in that. CR2 has teamed up with a fintech in Ethiopia and a bank. And we've launched the Amole project, which is, again, a great example of how electronic wallets can be used very effectively for providing many of the pillar stones of digital financial inclusion. Also in Ethiopia, there was only one telco, and that was owned by the government.
And now they've passed some legislation to open up that market to more players, which is very important, again, to keep it a very competitive market. And they've also, from the banking perspective, they've eased up on the legislation. And now you will see in the next 3 to 5 years, more international banks coming into play as well. So when it comes to innovation, banks have a tendency to look at the broader picture, what's going on at the global perspective. So rather than just looking at their local region. And here's a good example of a telco in Colombia who had 13,000 or so of these payphone devices that were becoming obsolete because everybody was using the mobile phone. So they decided to convert all of these payphones into miniature kiosk machines. And because they're payphone devices, they take coins. So the segment that they were going after was 25% of the underbanks were earning less than $3.50 a day. So they were the ideal segment to use these payphone devices to get money into their electronic wallets. And that initiative worked out very well for that. If you look over at what went on in India, so there's a very famous Indian economist who's a Nobel Prize winner, coined the phrase, poverty is the deprivation of opportunity. Now, DFI brings a lot of opportunity to the table. There is a bank called Punjab National Bank, and they targeted the rickshaw drivers in 100 cities. And they put a fund together of 1.5 million to provide credit to these rickshaw drivers. Because typically the rickshaw drivers were not getting access to credit, they weren't getting access to medical or insurance and so on. So that project ended up selling 10,000 low-cost loans over a 3-year period to those rickshaw drivers, and then enabled prosperity for them. So let's have a look at CR2's DFI touchpoints. Well, in these developing markets, we've got a number of banks that are proving various different building blocks of our DFI solution. So for example, Access Bank have proven the scalability of our system, which is very, very important. Credo Bank and the Imole project are showing how QR codes can be used as a very effective payments instrument for these markets, like making payments to people or making payments to merchants. Very effective. CRDB have been very successful with their agency banking. Likewise with Aura Bank have been very successful across West Africa. So many of our customers are actively involved in the DFI space and are using CR2 to enable it. But our record, so we've enabled DFI and agency banking across West Africa. Very, very important. 11 countries Aura Bank are servicing at this stage. In our emerging and developing markets, we are providing many of the DFI building blocks. And you can really say that CR2 have been pioneers in the retail banking space in Africa and beyond. Over the last 25 years, we've converged the digital channels with the physical channels, so we can offer services like cash out facilities on ATMs and cash in facilities through agents using the digital channels as well. So we've done a lot, but we have a lot more to do as well. So for example, agency banking, I mentioned, is a very important aspect of DFI to be able to serve that community through a network of agents. And there's some things that we can do there, like improve the reporting, help the agents manage their float a lot better. So they kind of need a pseudo branch system so that they can manage the income and outgoings of cash in the agents. Also as well, there's some extra things that we could do in allowing the agents to manage hierarchies. So they like to organize agents into, super agents and sub-agents and so on. There's some work that we can do on that. But overall, we've done a very good job so far.
So how do you see the future panning out?
The future will be very interesting in the DFI space, particularly with all of the technological advances that are going on. So we'll see that maybe technologies like blockchain will become ubiquitous around the DFI space, where cryptocurrencies will also be utilized as a payment instrument on the blockchain. And also it'll be used for storing contracts for individuals. So a lot of these people in the DFI segment are actually, they don't have any records of where their assets are, what house they live in and so on. So that can actually be utilized in the blockchain to record that information. And also the pillars of DFI, like access to credit, can also be recorded within these contracts. So the future will look very, very interesting, but who really knows what's going to happen? So maybe putting the question back to you, what do you think the future will hold for DFI? But to me, it's going to be very promising.
That was Patrick Simons, CR2's head of pre-sales. And that's it for this episode and this series of Sound Byte Sessions. We'll return with a new look next year, but for now, from me, Tristan Mulhall, and all of us involved in producing Sound Byte Sessions in Dublin and around the world, thanks for watching and goodbye.